Flowing from headwaters deep in the White Mountains, the Saco River winds 75 miles through dense woodland and rural farmland before meeting the cold waters of the Atlantic in Biddeford. It was this tumultuous current of water that provided power to the mills, brought raw cotton from southern merchants, delivered coal to feed the boilers, and whale oil to light the street lamps. The story of two riverside towns is forever intertwined with the river that helped them to become some of the largest and wealthiest of their time.
So the key to the success of the Pepperell Mills has to be the Saco River. Its value cannot be understated. When Samuel Batchelor arrived in 1830 and looked at Cataract Falls, he realized that the 40-foot drop in water was going to create a lot of power, more power than he would even need to build the complex he had in mind. There were things that had to be done with the river before they even started. One of them being they had to send their agents 30 miles upriver to Freiburg to secure water rights. They did not want anybody building a dam on the river that was going to put them out of business. While most of the mills in New England simply cut a canal alongside the river to generate their water power and drive their turbines, in the case of the Pepperell, the water supply runs perpendicular to the river through a series of canals and tunnels, and it required a great deal of engineering before the first brick could ever be laid. So as we come down the river, we noticed that there was a boatyard on the right-hand side. They fabricated 6 schooners, which they used to carry their goods to the Orient, which was a big market for them. In fact, it represented a third of their business early on. Once the mill stopped using water power and was using coal, they had to bring all the coal upstream and have it here by October because the river froze over. So there were huge mounds of coal sitting over there, and all had to be transported in and out to power up the plant. Additionally, on the left-hand side of the Saco River, as you go downstream, there's a huge clay deposit, which allowed them to build 2 brick factories, which accounted for all of the bricks you see in the mills themselves. Millions and millions of bricks.
In 1837, York Manufacturing began a separate company, the Saco Water Power Company, which would produce textile machinery and control water power rights for the Saco all the way from Biddeford to Freiburg. The company built canals and streets, constructed machinery, and erected buildings. 23 new streets were laid out, and 600 stores and houses were built in less than a decade in Biddeford alone. The canals are especially unique, however, as they were built as underground tunnels rather than typical open-air canals which would run alongside the mill buildings. The construction rivals the historic structures of Rome, but are all hidden below the mills.
So here we are at the bottom of Biddeford, affectionately known as the lagoon. This is where the water was collected that drove all the power to all of the machinery in the mills. The mills used water power from inception, 1840, until about a few years before the Civil War, and steam engines were getting easier to acquire. And so they used steam for the most part, but they used water whenever they could because they owned it and it was free. The way it worked, behind that wall there is another lagoon, similar in size. Water came in from the river, collected in that lagoon, and went out under pressure through tunnels to mill number 3, the Lincoln Mill, and then come back through another tunnel into these 5 tunnels to power all the equipment in the mill. The water turned turbines that were in the bottom of these tunnels that ran shafts all the way up the building, and then with leather belts powered all of the equipment. So it was a very elaborate scheme. When this was operational, the water would have been right at the height we're standing right now. In 1837, the Irish were coming into the United States because of the famine. And agents from the mill were meeting them at the ports and saying, if you need work, we have work for you. And they had to dig this elaborate tunnel system before any of the buildings could be built, which is an amazing engineering feat. So they completed that in about 2 years, and the mill brought in Italian stoneworkers. And they're the ones who built these arches. This is all Biddeford granite. If you notice, there's no mortar joints. It's all carved, and it's been 170 years, and it's still holding up very nicely. The tunnels on the other lagoon that come in from the river are actually about 30 feet tall and about 30 feet wide. You could drive a semi-truck through them, and they're all lined in brick, and they're still in very, very good shape. No water comes in from the river anymore. It's all been sealed off.
In 1820, before the first textile mill was constructed, the combined population of Biddeford and Saco was 4,200. By the 1850s, the combined population had risen to well over 15,000. At that time, there were 3 textile manufacturing companies in operation: York Manufacturing, Laconia, and Pepperell. Together they employed about 3,500 people, had 11 mill buildings, operated 70 boarding houses, and produced more than 25 million yards of cotton fabric annually. Cotton was purchased from the South in 500-pound bales and stored in warehouses made with concrete floors, low ceilings, and small windows.
We're now in building 36, which a lot of people refer to as the Great Wall of Biddeford because it stretches down Main Street. The first 2 floors were built in 1890, and in 1915 there was a fire in one of the other cotton warehouses, so they had to add the 5 floors onto this building. If you notice these pylons, they're made of concrete. The ceiling is concrete, the floors are concrete. That's not only because of fire, but also because of the weight of the bales of cotton. The bales were 2 by 2 by 5 feet, and they weighed 500 pounds each. The reason these windows are so small like they are, cotton will yellow in sunlight, so they had to reduce the sunlight in these buildings. If you go throughout New England, you'll see other textile towns and you'll see similar buildings with small windows, and chances are those were also cotton warehouses. As you notice, this isn't one continuous room. There are different sections to it, and in each section, closing it off, there is a fire door. This little piece right here is a piece of lead. Lead is known to have a very low melting point. When it would fall off, the weight would fall and the door would roll shut. Thus closing it off and hopefully causing the fire to be contained to this room. There were 2 major fires, and fires were a constant problem for the mills. The first one in 1915 and the second one in 1942, and they were both in cotton warehouses. All the workers had to be trained in how to fight the fires. On each pillar in their departments, there would be a bucket of water. They got so good at it that the city was rarely called in to help them. In fact, they got so good that if there was a major fire in the city, they would often come here and have workers assist them.
In 1844, Saco Water Power began construction on the Laconia mills. The first mills on the Biddeford side of the river would house the Pepperell Manufacturing Company. This new endeavor would specialize in heavy denim-like fabrics.
The cotton textile industry developed in Lancaster, England around 1760. Immediately became so successful Due to developments in some technology, such as the spinning mule, the spinning jenny, and the power loom, allowing them to make cotton commercially, the key to that was that it was powered by cheap water power. The true start of the Industrial Revolution in America began around 1812 through the efforts of Francis Cabot Lowell. He had been in England a couple of years studying the manufacturing and brought it to Waltham, Massachusetts, where he built his first plant. The Charles River didn't allow for expansion, so he sent his superintendent, a gentleman named Samuel Batchelder, to East Chelmsford, Massachusetts, now called Lowell, on the Merrimack River, to see what the potential was there. It turned out to be good. They purchased a great deal of land and started building the Hamilton Mills. And in spite of them buying up all the land they could, by 1828, they had no place to grow. The city had grown up so fast around them that they were locked in. So again, they asked Samuel Batchelder to come to Biddeford to see what opportunities were there. When he had arrived here initially, he had looked at the falls and realized that the real value was in the Biddeford side of the river. That's where the mill should have been built initially. And after a couple of years, he finally got his way, and construction started on those mills, the first being the Laconia Mill in 1844 and then the Pepperell in 1850, which started the whole complex of buildings that became the second largest cotton manufacturing facility in the United States, next to Lowell, Massachusetts. So the time after World War I was a very difficult time for the cotton textile industry. Recession had set in after World War I. There was no longer the demand for the cotton that had been demanded years before. And a bigger problem was that the industry had gotten very stale and staid. They hadn't innovated at all. They were overwhelmed with paying dividends to their shareholders to the cost of everything else. And it was starting to have its effect on the industry. Mills were falling away by the wayside at a pretty substantial rate. A gentleman in Fall River, Massachusetts became the treasurer of a floundering company, and within 5 years had brought it back to profitability. And so the principals at Pepperell, seeing what was going on, hired him to be their CEO. He innovated with new office space, new workspaces. He brought in his own sales representatives to market directly to retail customers, which hadn't been done before. So they broadened their product offering to include different colors, different styles, different fabrics. He created the Lady Pepperell brand, which became an upscale brand for ladies who wanted the better things in bedding and sheeting. All of that proved to be a masterstroke. And while other companies were still floundering, the Pepperell grew dramatically over the next 30 years.
Looking for a massive labor force to work in the quickly expanding mills, the Pepperell Manufacturing Company hired young women from the surrounding rural farming communities. The mill girls, as they became known, moved into the bustling towns of Biddeford and Saco from their family farms. They lived in company-owned boarding houses. Expected to attend church every Sunday, they were able to attend cultural events and even to have a tutor if they desired. They worked long hours in very harsh conditions, but were able to earn money and have opportunities not available to them on the farm. These young women were paid a rate of about $6 a month. Nearly half their wages would be for lodging and meals.
We are entering 13 Mill, which is an L-shaped building and the largest building on the mill complex. It was built in 1911, and it was built on the site of the boarding houses of the mill girls who were the first workers within the mill. This room was used as a weaving room and has some unique architectural features, in particular the sawtooth roof and very large windows. These features were designed in order to allow light to come into the weaving room so that complex weaves could be woven into fabric. Each of the mill buildings have a designation by number for the building function as well as the floor. In 13-1, the downstairs area housed 1,500 draper looms, which are all operating at the same time. The looms needed to be kept in an environment in which the temperature of the weave room was 100 degrees and 85% or higher humidity. This was done in order to keep the tensile strength of the cotton from breaking. That environment was an incredibly challenging work environment for the employees, but it was a high preference work environment for mill workers because those skilled workers were the highly paid workers within the mill.
The ledgers are the heart of the museum. The information in these are invaluable to us. In 1986, 2 mill workers were told to go up to 19 Mill, the former Laconia office, and they were instructed to clean out the safe. Now, it wasn't filled with money at the time, but what they did find was even more valuable to us. It was these ledgers. There were 94 of them. They covered the whole realm of whatever was going on in the mill, from the payroll ledgers to other ledgers that had the daily expenses, what they bought for the mill, the cotton bales, paying for the shipping, the ships. In fact, one even included whale oil. This particular one is a payroll ledger from 1852. Janice Pillsbury, she worked 29 3/4 days at the mill, and for that she received $24.79, and she signed her name over here. The writing of the agent is just impeccable. It's really amazing. We had thought that the books had disappeared. We had no idea where they went. So now all of these ledgers, all 97 of them, have been digitized, and people can come in and view them on the computer. And that way they don't have to go through and possibly damage the actual ledgers.
In 1852, Pepperell began shipping to China. By 1870, Pepperell was shipping textiles to India and Ceylon, now known as Sri Lanka. Pepperell's drill, a strong cotton fabric, was quite popular in China. Since the Chinese and Indians who bought the product often could not read English, a trademark needed to be created that was easily identifiable. Francis Skinner, then part owner of Pepperell, originated the Pepperell Dragon as their textile trademark. Skinner chose the dragon as it was a common and easily recognized Chinese symbol.
When the Pepperell Manufacturing Company became into full operation approximately 1850, the mill agent wanted to expand the opportunity for sales not only in the United States but across the world. To that end, he secured the services of Francis Skinner, who was a selling agent from New York City. Skinner was able to convince the mill agent and subsequently the board to allow him to get shares within the company in order to develop a particular product that actually had been developed by Batchelor many years before, and this product was drill. Drill was known to be an outstanding cotton fabric woven diagonally that allowed it to have strength but also some coolness to the touch. Now, drill is commonly known as the product that we actually use today as the lining in a blue jean pocket. The quality of the drill was the quality that Skinner wanted to promote for the sales. Now, the market in China and India was quite significant, and there was great hope for the success of the product. In order to provide a easily recognizable trademark for the buyers in China, they needed to have some type of symbol that didn't rely upon the written English word. And to that end, they combined a variety of elements that you'll see right here in this representation of a griffin. Probably what is most remarkable is one of the early stamp blocks, which was actually used to stamp the trademark and the company information on the goods that were coming out of the Pepperell Center. This trademark became extraordinarily powerful, and the essence of the trademark maintained itself through the 150-year history of the company.
The mill complex comprises of 10 acres. They began in 1847 and continued through to 2009. In those years, there was a continuous textile presence here in Biddeford. The mills operated throughout the year, and whether there was storms, raining, or snow, the mills were still running. And to get to each building, they built either a bridge or tunnels in some cases. So pretty much all the buildings are connected. The outlying community, they grew with the mills. The mills built the Thatcher Hotel, post office, the courthouse, even the schools were built by the mills. The workers outside of the mills also contributed. They built the material to keep the mills going, the hardware stores. So it was a community effort. The community grew with the mills.
In 1880, about half of the population of Biddeford was foreign-born. Records show residents from Canada, Ireland, Germany, Portugal, Denmark, Italy, and Malta. No longer were the majority of workers Yankee farm girls. Now, more French Canadians worked in the mills, and more of the employees were men than women. The variety of churches in the town attests to the international flavor. The usual New England Protestant denominations, along with Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Jewish, and what is believed to be the nation's first Muslim mosque.
The story of the textile industry in Biddeford is really a story of immigration. And immigrant workers played a significant role in the success of the mills. From 1820 until 1850, there was a great population growth in Biddeford. The population grew from 4,200 to 15,000. By 1880, more than half of the population in Biddeford was foreign-born. The population of immigrant workers changed over time. In 1856, the completion of the Grand Trunk Railroad from Montreal to Portland, in addition to bringing farm goods, the expansion of the rail line also allowed an opportunity for French-Canadian workers to come and work within the textile mills in Biddeford. This is an important migration of workers who contributed very strongly to the success as well as the culture of Biddeford and the surrounding communities. They tended to come en masse in a group, so extended French-Canadian families would come here and bring their culture and their worship to the community as well. In the 1920s, migration continued as a result of world conflict. During that time period, people came from Russia, Poland, Lithuania, Greece, Italy, and Turkey to work in the mills. And each of the groups brought a unique contribution to the community.
By 1950, the Pepperell had expanded into the south. What attracted the companies originally, the water power and the manpower, wasn't as necessary. It was more necessary to be closer to where the raw product was. The board of directors convened in Philadelphia in 1952. The head of the blanket division here in Biddeford was a man named Francis Spencer. When he went before the board of directors, they asked him outright if he was happy with his job. Being a truthful person, he said no. As he went home after, he worried about that because he had children to support, and he worried about his job. Sure enough, a few weeks later, they called him again before the board, but what they told him was they were going to make him the head of R&D. They gave him instructions he had to come up with a new product, and they ran thousands, literally thousands of experiments. What they came up with, foam, polyurethane, that was developed in Germany after the war. It's a very lightweight product. It's very warm, but the problem with it is it's not very strong. So they started experimenting, and they came up with this nylon scrim. What they did, they would take it and lay it on a layer of foam, put another layer of foam over it, and they would melt the two layers together. Well, that worked. They came up with a substrate, which is a very strong fabric. It so happened that the mills generally closed down for the week between Christmas and New Year's, and he noticed on one of the workers' desks they had a Christmas card, and on the card it was laminated. It had flock on it, and a light went off in his head, and he says, "We can work with that." So what they came up with was a nylon flock. It's about 0.08 millimeters long and very fluffy. And what they would do, they would sprinkle it onto a layer of adhesive. What they came up with next was they would pass it through an electric field, and that would cause the fibers to stand up in the foam, and it would drive the flock into the adhesive on the blanket. This would be the final product that they would come up with. It's very strong, very colorful, it's very lightweight. The Velux is Vel for velvet, soft. The Lux is light, and this was their final blanket they came up with. The Velux blanket originated here in Biddeford, and this is the only place it was made. It was the largest selling blanket in the world. They were selling 3 blankets a minute for years. It became so popular that Francis Spencer and his crew saved these mills for another 43 years. In 2009, the mills closed for good, and the current owner had the germ of an idea to have a museum here one day. There was a group of mill veterans and volunteers that got together for this, and we established the Biddeford Mills Museum. We continue to give educational programs and tours through the mills to this day.
The sound of the looms is gone, the canals bricked over and dry, but now there is a new energy surrounding the mill district. Nearly all of the buildings within the district have been rehabilitated and repurposed. In fact, there are more people working in the mill district now than when the textile mills were operating at full capacity. In 2018, solar panels were installed on 3 of the largest of the Pepperell campus buildings. The 1,192-panel solar array spread over 1.5 acres of rooftop, enough to easily power the campus's 100-plus residential units. In 2018, the Biddeford Saco Mills Historic District was added to the National Register of Historic Places. The 250-foot brick chimney no longer belches exhaust from the massive boilers. Instead, it serves as a reminder, a landmark for these two cities who grew up along the banks of the Saco and helped set the world standard for textile manufacturing during the golden age of industry.